It's iRacing's new build for 2025. New graphics, new adjustments, and some new frame per second woes arrive along with it. Welcome everybody to my latest video. Hope this one turns out to be helpful and useful for a lot of users. If you're like me, you've updated your iRacing, you've started season 1, you're looking forward to all the new graphics and all the new gravel and all the new things that iRacing can do, but unfortunately you took a frame per second hit with the new build. This happens quite often. Just when they make certain changes, when certain adjustments are made. And this build was another big one that we all waited for. New cars, new tracks, new tire model for GT and GTP. Lots of stuff going on in here. And one of the other things they did is they actually changed some of the graphics and how they work, which means, in short, some of the INI files that you have edited may not be utilizing all of the features of the newest package. And I have actually tested this, and I reset all of my INI files back to their originals using the graphics config, and my frame rates, without any adjustments to iRacing or anything, my frame rates automatically went up. Now, just to give you some insight here, I have been waiting until this build. I have been running on a 1660 Ti with 6 gigs of RAM GPU, with lots of low settings to be able to race comfortably and have the cleanest picture possible. For this build, and with it being so close to Christmas, I kind of treated myself, and I went and I got myself a 4070 with 12 gigs of RAM. Now, I can be impatient sometimes, like many people, and this brand new 4070, I wanted to get it in, get it up and running. So I pulled out my 1660, I put in my 4070, I reinstalled NVIDIA with a fresh, clean install, and I went to iRacing to see what I could get. Now, when I loaded iRacing, obviously the first thing I wanted to do was crank all the graphics and see where it's at, which I did. I went in and put it to its max. And said, here, turn everything on, make everything really, really pretty. But didn't get the frame rate that I was really expecting to get. I really expected more. But I also know from my technical background that what's behind the GPU also makes a big difference as to what the GPU can do based on what you have running it. So this video, I'm going to let you know what I have for my equipment so that you can do a comparison. Maybe you've got more RAM than I do. Maybe you've got, maybe your card is better than mine. Maybe your card is a little lower than mine. But overall, you should be able to utilize some of the things you learn in here to maybe gain yourself some frames per second, or give up some frames per second, just to make your racing experience that much better. I'm going to start off here so that you can see what I'm running so that you can make a comparison. I will also include this information in the description below. But as you can see on the screen, I am running Microsoft Windows 11 Pro, 64-bit version, latest driver from NVIDIA, a AMD Ryzen 9 7900X 12-core processor with 64 gigs of RAM. I have both hard disk drive and SSD drives in the system, and I'm using my new NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4070. That is my base equipment hardware. I am also running this on 3 27-inch triple screens with a Thrustmaster TRS wheel. I have a Stream Deck. I stream some of my races, so lots of stuff going on in my machine at a time. And these are currently the graphics that I'm getting within iRacing. small disclaimer here before we get started. I am not an expert. You're hearing my experiences and my interpretations of how things occurred and how I'm reading things that have gotten me to the point I am. I could be completely wrong about certain things. I may be completely right. But just know this is all based on my experience and my experiences with iRacing and the process that I've done and the testing that I've done and the time I've taken to do it. So, try all this at your own risk, but I think if you do some of this, you will find yourself having a better vision when you're in the cockpit of the car, and a more consistent frame rate when you're in a race with 45 plus other cars. So the first thing I did, which everybody's going to hate, but I suggest you do, is I ran iRacing's config from the UI. Now what this does is this basically sets all of the INI files in iRacing for graphics back to fresh install settings. So if, like me, you don't use surround sound and you have your monitors hard-coded in the INI, it's going to overwrite them, and you're going to have to go back in and edit that INI to get yourself back, your screens back where they are. And any other changes that you may have made. I can say from experience that when I did this and then went back into iRacing was better. And I think a lot of that is, maybe there's certain settings that they don't use anymore, or certain settings they've enhanced, or they've, modified how it reads the setting. So it just makes sure that you are running right up to date video-wise. So I recommend you do it. I'm not going to go through the whole procedure here. There are videos on how to reset your iRacing video using the config out of the UI, so I'm not going to waste your time with that, but I recommend you do it, and then once you do, you can continue on in the video, and we will go through the iRacing settings. You can see here now the current settings that I am running within iRacing. Currently, this is the settings that I currently have on my machine. I am still tweaking them a bit, but I've done a fair amount of testing, and this gives me pretty close to 175 frames per second at all time. It's pretty smooth. I don't have any jittering, and all of the features, the track, the lines, everything looks really, really crisp and clean. Now, before I go any further, I shouldn't have to say this, but I want you to know that you have two graphics. You have your graphics, which is going to be when you're in the cockpit of the car, and then you have your replay. Now, your replay is only in effect, and those settings are only in effect when you're sitting watching a replay. So, crank those up. I have the video you're watching, the replay you're watching is with all of these settings, so that you can see shadows, you can see benchmarks, you can see everything. You can see a little bit extra cloud movement. But the graphic is the main one. The only thing that transitions over to your replay is the anti-aliasing. But graphics is for what everything is going to look like when you're in the cockpit of the car. So I'm going to go through with why I have some of these graphics, where I have them, and then I can go through with you as well as to some of the other offshoot graphics that you can select that can either increase your frame rate or seriously crush it. Now I'm going to work through the graphics screen from left to right. All of the settings on the left hand side are the details and graphics that are drawn around the track while you're in the middle of a race. Pretty straightforward: sky and clouds, pit objects, grandstands. But I'll go through with you why I have them set the way I do, and if possible, let you know what kind of frame rate loss or gain you'll get by making a modification to this. So the first one, and probably the one that will give you the biggest hit or gain, is the sky and clouds. If you're in the middle of a race, do you really care how detailed the clouds are? On high detail with my current settings, it's a 40 plus frame loss by changing it to high detail, and that is with heavy cloud cover. So 40 frames per second, I can definitely use that elsewhere within the sim. Cars, I have to set to medium. Now, there's a reason for that I will get into later. Pit objects. You're racing. Do you really care how many pits, how good the pits look? A lot of people set this to medium because it has to be set to medium to be able to see your pit crew come over the wall when you're in a NASCAR race. But I mean, you're in a race. You're not watching the race. You're in the race. Do you really care whether or not you can see your pit crew come over the wall and in front of your car? You're going to gain frame rate by having this at low detail. I'm going to skip over events for now, simply because it coincides with objects. So grandstands, I actually like having the grandstands just for reference points, and it does make it look prettier when you're racing around, and you can see the grandstand, especially on a road course like Daytona, where the grandstand can actually help you gauge where you are on track and where a turn-in point is, or etc. when you're on the road course. Crowds, I'm in a race. I don't care whether or not I can see people in the stands. You're gonna take a frame hit if you turn this on. I don't understand why people have it on when they're in a race. I get it for a replay, but I don't understand why people have it on when you're in a race. So this brings us to objects. Now, objects in an event are the details on the outside of the track and on the inside of the track. So if you're racing like I am here at Spa, when you're coming up to the final chicane and there's the walkover, if you turn your I can't remember which one it is, whether it's event or objects, but if you turn these down, those will disappear. And a lot of us use those for reference points. I use the overhangs for reference points. I use Marshall stands for reference points. And by turning these down, those will disappear from the track, and you have to find new points. So I recommend having event and objects at high detail. The new foliage I haven't played with. Again, it's one of those funny things where do you need to see that when you're in a race? I mean, it's great for in the replay, but I mean, do you really need that detail in the race? Particles, obviously you want that high. That's going to give you the rubber bits and allow you to see the texture in the track, as well as the new gravel options that have come out with the latest build. You'll see the gravel come out on the track. You'll see a little bit more dust. It just gives you more visual as to what is actually happening on the track. And full res. You're not going to take a frame rate hit by having it at full res. And when you have it on full res, it just shows much better and much cleaner. So the next one is the max cars. Now I run race laps, which recommends having 60, and actually I think it's 64. You have to have it set at max 64 cars for it to do the standings and everything else properly. But that doesn't mean you have to draw that many cars. So I have right now, the first one is how many cars are drawn in front of you and the number of cars that are drawn in your mirrors. So I can see 20 cars in front of me at any one point in time, and I can only see 4 cars in my mirror. You may want to boost this to 8 if you want to see more cars in the mirror, but I really think having more than 4 cars in the mirrors just really isn't conducive. I mean, you're only paying attention to the guy that's coming up on your butt, not necessarily the 3 cars that are, half a lap behind him. And drawing minimum pits. You are in a race. You don't need to see everybody else's pit boxes. You don't need to see everybody else's car, pit crew sitting on the pit box while they're in the pits or as you're passing the pits. This is going to crush your frame rate. It's going to take away frames per second from you. You don't need them in a race. It's a visual thing. You can try it and you can maybe turn it up. Once you get to where you want to be, you can try increasing some of these settings. And then, just see if you're happy with the frame rate loss that you're going to take by increasing these settings. Dynamic load, FPS, I didn't touch that. I have left it at world minus only, cars minus only. If my understanding of this is correct, if for any reason my frame rate drops below my limit, which I have set at 175 currently, I will be dropping that once I have done all my testing. It will dynamically change the graphic setting for the world and the cars to allow you to maintain the frame rate that you selected. And that's it. I mean, these graphics are for in the race. This has nothing to do with when you're in the UI and you're watching a replay. You can set all these to max in a replay and it will look beautiful. But you want clean representation of the track and all the things around it that you utilize for your race without taking a huge frame rate hit. And as I said, two of the biggest frame hit killers are skies and clouds. And sky and clouds, high grandstands, and the crowds. Yeah, maybe you want to, I don't know, do you want to see a crowd when you're doing 100 km/h around a corner? I mean, that's your personal choice. But those are the settings that I have. And as you can see, I mean, I'm even in a replay. Yes, I have everything cranked, but it looks the same for me when I'm in a race with maybe some of the detail down. So with that, we are going to move on to the second part, which is our anti-aliasing and all of our shadowing. This section is where you will either crush your frame rate or you will gain frame rate. The anti-aliasing, if you're not familiar with it, this is what smooths all the graphics, takes care of the jagged lines, gives you crisp lines along the edge of the track, just makes everything nice and clean. With the latest update, iRacing has removed the option to have FXAA and MSAA set separately. You now have to choose the anti-aliasing method that you want. MSAA is recommended. If you use any of the other ones, FXAA, I believe it's AO, you're not going to take a frame. You're not going to get a frame increase. You're not going to take a frame hit. Your screens, your videos, it's just not going to look nice. I have tested this, and it doesn't look pretty. So I highly recommend MSAA. Where you can gain or lose frames per second is the sampling. I have mine set at 4 times. I'm still playing with this, but 4 or 2 seems to be a good place to be. If you go to 8 time, if you got the machine for it, go ahead. But at 8 times, I'm just losing too much frame rate, and it doesn't really make a difference visually. The other filter beside it is has simple, sharp. There's different filters. Again, I'm still playing around with these. I'm still tweaking this. So I just leave it on simple, and I'm going to leave it there for now. Again, skies and clouds. Do you need shadows on the clouds? You're in the middle of a race. You don't need to see shadowing from the clouds. And this is the shadow on the track from the cloud. It's pretty. It lets you maybe be a little bit more immersed, knowing that the cloud is going to cast a shadow on the track. But as far as I'm concerned, it's a frame rate hit in a race that I don't want. Night shadow maps. I do have that turned on. Again, something else I'm going to play with. Walls, number of lights, and no filter. This is more for night races and how it's going to handle all the shadowing during night races. So if you need to do an endurance race and it transitions from day to night, then you can, it just enhance how it looks. But again, turn it off, turn it down, get your frame rates for when you're in a race. Dynamic cube maps, fixed cube maps, don't touch these, leave them alone. They will not help you. They won't do anything for you. Shader quality, I have high detail, and the reason for this is high detail and ultra detail, no difference other than the gain in frame rate. you're not going to see a visual difference between ultra and high detail with these current settings. So just set yourself to high detail and enjoy the frame rate that you get from that one little click from ultra to high. Finally, we get to what I like to call the make it pretty settings, because these settings are what will give or take frame rates from you. So I'll go through them as quick as I can here. I know this has been a pretty long video. Thank you for sticking around. So for steering wheel, I have show only if it has display. I don't want to see the steering wheel in my line of sight turning or with my hands or anything like that. But depending on where I'm sitting in the car, if it has a display and I can see it, I like to be able to see the display. Again, personal choice. You can have this set to whatever you want. It may affect your frame rate a little bit. I haven't tested it because this is how I like it, and I've liked it this way for quite some time. To pass trees, high quality trees. Again, you're in a race. Does it really matter how nice the trees look when you're going past them at 100 mile an hour? Turn these off. You don't need them in the race. It's just going to cost you frame rates. Cockpit mirrors. I run triples, and I have both my side mirrors and my rear view mirror. I want to be able to utilize them. The max mirror 4, if you turn it to 4, it actually allows you to have the back view camera that is displayed in a lot of the newer cars as opposed to the rear view mirror. Once I get everything set, I'm going to turn this down to 3 because most of the time when I'm sitting in the cockpit of the car, I can't see that camera view anyways, so I'm just going to turn it off, give myself a few more frame rates. Higher detail in mirrors. Again, you're in a race. All you want to know is that the guy's there. Headlights. Playing with this one, I haven't really done any night testing for the headlights and headlights on track and mirrors. Haven't really done a lot of testing on this. Virtual mirror, again, personal preference. Make it whatever you want. Motion blur off, 100%. Keep this off. It's going to kill your frame rate, and it's not going to do you any good in a race. This brings us down to the ones that will 100% crush your frame rate depending on what is happening in the race. So the first one is the SSR. Now this is specific for changing everything when it's raining on track, and giving you more detail, more depth, and turning this on and selecting any of the options will give you a frame rate hit. Currently with the SSR off, if it's a full downpour on track, I'm losing about 25 to 30 frames per second when it's a full downpour on track. Now, for you lose a fair amount if you play with these settings, and as you can see here, I've put what you will lose for frame rate with each individual setting, or what I have lost when selecting any of these settings within a rain session. You can see here the loss is pretty significant. I mean, even with my equipment, 85, 95, you might as well say that's 100 frames per second you're going to lose by selecting one of these options and having it on all the time in a race session. And I mean, play around with it if you want. Maybe the visuals will be a little bit better as to puddling and stuff like that, but I highly recommend leaving this off, especially if you're going to be running in races where there's a chance of rain, and you're going to have to deal with that frame rate loss when it starts raining. So now we come to our HDR, sharpening, distortion, heat haze, SSAO, video mem swap, 2048, and hide car numbers. So now you can see here what I have discovered for frame rate loss with distortion, heat haze, HDR, and SSAO. This is the frame rate that I am losing by turning these on. And you can see heat haze, HDR, SSAO, it's pretty significant hit. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, it's 20 frames per second. Those 20 frames per second could be better for you in the race during a particular move than they are giving you heat haze or whatever, what HDR is giving you, or SSAO. So I recommend leaving these off. I have turned on distortion now. I mean, it's 5 frames. I'm not going to worry about it. Now the other one is sharpening. So I have my cars set to medium detail, because what I lose by going from high detail to medium detail for viewing of the car, and the frame rate I gain by doing that, I can turn on sharpening and be right back to if I had the car at high detail. Plus it helps everything else around the track look much, much prettier. The last two here, video memory swap high-res cars and the 2048 by 2048 car textures. I have 64 gigs of system memory. I have 12 gigs of VRAM. So I'm leaving that turned on. I'm going to let it utilize the RAM that I have, both on my video card and in my system. Now, during this transition to the My 4070, I've talked to a few people that I race with, and discovered some of them are running like 16 gigs of RAM in their system. Not to be rude, but go spend $100 and get yourself at least 32 gig. But if you're running 32 gig or lower in iRacing, you probably want to turn both of these off. iRacing even warns you that it will utilize a lot of memory, be it VRAM or system RAM. And if you're running 32 or lower, you really don't have the overhead to do that. You're better off to turn these off. I mean, check your frame rates, but I mean, turn them off, free up the memory for other portions of the iRacing service and any background programs that you have running on the system while you're racing, such as overlays and stuff like that. So if you're at 64, turn both of these on, let it utilize your system memory and your VRAM. If you have a lower card that maybe doesn't have a lot of VRAM, then you can turn off the 20 by 48 car textures, because I believe that one uses VRAM for memory swapping. But if you're 64 and above and you've got probably anywhere from 4 to 4+ gigs on your video card, leave the video memory swap on and leave the 2048 turned on. It will just allow things to be less jittery when it has to change textures on the cars on the track. And that's going to do it. Before I go into my closing remarks, I do want to make a quick note about the res scaling and reflex options up in the display. Now, using the res scaling with all of the settings that I currently have just was not pretty at all. It did not look good. It did not look right. Did it give me frame rates? It gave me more frames, but it did not look nice. It didn't look clean. There was a lot of jagged edges. It just did not look nice at all. So I recommend not using the scaling. Just leave it alone. Get your settings set without having to use the res scaling. And the reflex, which is a latency setting for, and it has enabled or enabled plus boost. I actually lost FPS when I set this to enabled and boosted. So again, just one of those settings that I feel, depending on your equipment, this may actually make what you're seeing look worse, as opposed to making it better. I'm not even going to play with that. I'm not even going to test it. My iRacing looks, as far as I'm concerned, beautiful right now. And I mean, yes, that's coming off of a 1660 Ti, but even when I'm in a race, it's so much cleaner. My reference points are so much better. I can just race better because I can see much cleaner, like I am in real life. So with that said, let's get into my closing remarks here, and a few things that I think you should know, and my thanks for checking out this video. thank you for sticking around all the way to the end of this video. I really appreciate you taking the time to check it out, and my hope is that if this helps even one person get better at graphics within iRacing and higher frame rates, then the video is totally worth creating and taking the time to create. Couple of little tips I will throw out there. When you're doing this testing, make sure you have everything that you will have running in a race running at the same time. So if you're like me and you have race labs, or even if you're a streamer and you have your stream software, make sure all of that is running while you're trying to get your frame rates. Because keep in mind, even though those programs are in the background, they're still making requests to the GPU. So it's putting more load on your GPU. So make sure those are up and running. I mean, you don't have to, I wasn't streaming at the time, but I had my streaming software up and running. I had my race labs up and running, my music, all of that. Make sure everything that you're going to have running during a race is up and running on your system when you're playing around and setting your frame rates. You can fix this in the NVIDIA Control Panel by setting a max background frame rate. I have mine set to 75. And this just brings into, I will be putting out another video in the new year. I'll try and do it quicker than later, because I'm going to do a bunch of testing with the NVIDIA settings as to what is beneficial to change, what is not beneficial to change. Is it even worth it to make adjustments to it? I have a couple other videos in the work. There will be a new one coming out for Crew Chief, again, as time allows. But if this video helped you, if you're looking forward to maybe some of the new videos, be sure to hit that follow button, hit that alert button. You'll know when the videos are coming out. And I look forward to making the next video for you and helping you out with your experiences within iRacing. Until then, race hard, race clean, and at least make it to the checkered flag.